recording is going to be saved into our meetup YouTube as well as Agile20 Reflect Festival, giant YouTube place. There's like over 600 plus events and Agile20 Reflect Festival, the first global free event festival where you can learn from everyone else in the world. And it's very interesting that we have people all over the world, implementing Agile, implementing Scrum, implementing this whole notion about product and product management and product owners. And what does product mean? What do you do? So this is a very important discipline that's evolved over the last several years. And it's made a significant change in how we work, how we think, and how companies become successful. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. So tonight we're gonna let Carlos, the CEO of Product School, educate us and share with us, what a great product owner or product manager opportunities and way of thinking and way of doing could be. His school is phenomenal. It's made a huge change. A lot of product types of people that he trains and educates become a part of the product fabric and communities and corporations today and companies, and they lead the charge. And this whole notion of what does a product owner or product manager do, right? And how they evolve the success of the company. So I welcome Carlos for his time to be here. The enterprise, San Francisco Enterprise Agile Group is about big companies. Well, that's our focus. We generally, do care about middle or mid range companies as well as startups. We care about them when we do provide information and work with them. But our focus a lot these days has been on big companies, large corporations, and how do they change? How do they become more agile? How do they evolve to a product-centric organization? It's very important today to evolve into that, right? So that's what we focus on. Agile20 Reflect Festival is celebrating the Agile 20 years of the Agile Manifesto, and this 600 plus Agile events throughout the world is part of that. So we're very lucky today to have this gentleman to talk to us, Carlos, about product, this whole notion, this new discipline, this new world of thinking, a world of being. So I'm so happy to have Carlos here to discuss this with us. So please, if you have any questions, write them down, and at the end, we'll do a Q&A. I'm going to put everyone on mute until Carlos says, okay, let's all speak or ask questions. So you can send questions to the chat, and we'll record them, and Gopal and Ron will help me kind of take all this in and then respond at the end with Carlos. So without further ado, let me introduce Carlos, so you can take us over and talk about product. Carlos, thank you.
Let's do it. Thank you everyone for being here. It's 6:38 p.m. in San Francisco. I know there are some people in Spain, so all over the world. It's exciting. When I started the company, Product School, 7 years ago, there weren't that many people in the room, trust me. Like a lot of the questions were about, but what is product management? Is this project management? Is this, do I need to code? Do I need an MBA? So I'm glad to see that we've been demystifying a lot of those things. And maybe there are some of you who are working directly or indirectly in product. So the purpose of the presentation today is to shed some light on really where the product management industry is going, because it's evolved quite a bit. And as you mentioned at the very beginning, it's not really that old. I mean, some people have been doing product for a long time, but the discipline of product management, that the amount of structure that we have today is unprecedented. especially now with the pandemic going on, like a lot of the roadmaps have been accelerated. So I'm going to share my screen so I can show you a few cool things that I prepared for this group. And if you have any questions that cannot wait until the end, shout it out. If not, of course, there's going to be plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So my last name is horrific. Don't even try to pronounce it. If you want to look me up on LinkedIn, just type Carlos and product school. I'm the only Carlos at my own company. One of the benefits of being a founder is that you get to pick your email. So I'm also carlos@productschool.com. And I'd be more than happy to continue the conversation. Just some context around who I am and what's happening with my company. So we are the largest player in product management training. We have an entire community of over 1 million product professionals around the world. We produce around 1,000 events per year. We also do 6 conferences per year. They're called ProductCon. And we created a product management certification that's being taught by, it's been received by over 20,000 people. So, 7 years is a lot of time. It always says that it takes some time to get an overnight success. I'm not claiming to have any success, but there's definitely something here. And it's mostly because more and more companies are hiring product managers. So it's probably a good opportunity to start considering this. I also wrote a book called The Product Book, and it's available for free. If you just go to productschool.com/book or just Google it, The Product Book, you'll be able to get a free copy. It got over 200,000 downloads, and it got translated into 4 languages: Spanish, English, Portuguese, and Arabic. It's also an audiobook version. And the reason why I did this is because not everyone can afford to go through some of our certifications. And I really wanted to create something practical for people who want to learn how to build digital products. There's a lot of books out there. In my opinion, most of them are focused too much on how to get a job, like literally how to hack your resume, how to do certain things that don't necessarily prove that you are a good product manager. So this book is the opposite. It's all about the A to Z process, showcasing examples from real world companies on how they can actually do it. And it's not actually my book. I mean, yes, I created it, but I wanted to involve a lot of the instructors who participate in our school. All of the instructors who teach at product school are product leaders who keep their full-time jobs at companies such as Google, Slack, Airbnb, Netflix. And it's very important because they are really the ones who have those best practices. And it was important for us to kind of extract that from those companies and put them in a visual way so other people can benefit from them. And now, hopefully, we all have the same vocabulary around road mapping, wireframing, sprints, and some of the things that the Agile movement started 20 years ago that have evolved quite a bit. So anyway, this is my path. It seems very simple, but it's not. I started my career as a software engineer, like probably some of you. I was one of those engineers who didn't want to spend the rest of his life coding. And the problem is I didn't even know my options. I was supposed to study full time and become an engineer, and then maybe a senior engineer, and then maybe a principal engineer. But it seems like leveraging my technical background in a different way wasn't in the cards for me. At least in Spain, this wasn't a thing. So what I really decided to do was to go to business school. And that's why I created a more complicated path. So after graduating from engineering and working as a software engineer for a few years, I decided to go to the extreme, mostly because there was no product school. And at the end of the day, what I've done with this company is a solution to my own problem. Because in reality, in business school, there wasn't a single class on product management, but not only that, digital marketing, data analytics, UX design, a lot of the digital skills that some of us use on a daily basis weren't really taught in a 2-year full-time program. So like, what's going on here? There are a lot of engineers like myself who are trying to leverage the technical background and think business. There are also a lot of business folks coming from more traditional backgrounds such as consulting, finance, marketing, that also wanted to get closer to the action. They wanted to roll up their sleeves, but they were feeling a little bit intimidated but by not having a proper technical background, not knowing how to interact with engineers. So here we are, these 2 different groups of people trying to tackle the same problem from different angles, yet business school wasn't really the solution. So anyway, I just continued my journey working as a founder. Literally, I started 2 companies before. And I think that's how I learned how to build digital products on the go, by failing, by asking people, by having formal or informal mentors. I was part of a couple of accelerator programs. One of them was called 500 Startups in Silicon Valley, which is really incredible because there were product managers from some of these top companies coming to us to give us feedback, to help us understand how to build digital products. And anyway, there was something that also the model in general was really powerful for me, because in an accelerator program, first of all, they pay you. You don't have to pay to be there if you get accepted. And also you get to build something. So you're almost learning as you do. And it's not that you have to sit down, consume content, and then apply for a job to try to get the chance to prove yourself. So obviously, accelerator programs are more focused on founders who want to build companies and raise money. What we do is focus on product people who want to get either their first product management job or their next promotion. So let's start from the beginning, because if you try to Wikipedia product management or product development cycles, you might get too confused. I don't want you to even try to read any of that, because it's horrible. I'm more of a visual person. I like to define product management as the intersection between these three groups: design, engineering, and business. By the way, I'm talking about digital products, okay? So I'm thinking about websites, mobile applications. You can even think about wearable devices, IoT devices, smartwatches, and so on. But I'm not thinking about physical structures like buildings or 3D printers or cars or anything like that. Obviously, there's more and more software in some of those physical structures, but the frameworks that I'm going to define are mostly applying to software. And the PM is right in the middle, which is weird, because this wasn't really that obvious back in the day. Like, a lot of people would say, but why do we need a product manager, right? Because you don't really code. Maybe in a previous life you used to code, but you are not required to code. You're not required to sell. You're not required to design. So why the hell are you here? Well, the reality is that you are here to really communicate between all these different groups of stakeholders and keep a common vision. In smaller companies, there is no such a thing as product manager. Usually the founder or one of the founders who's wearing that hat. It's only when you get to at least 5 to 7, maybe 10 engineers tops, when you truly need to bring in someone full-time to own product. And then we can discuss if that first PM is an internal promotion or it's an external hire. But the point is, at the very beginning, you won't see many really early stage startups with a product manager full-time. So let's talk about how you break into that, and what are some of the most common paths. This is evolving, by the way. When I started product school, number one was software engineering by far. I remember my first class where we got 90% of the students. I mean, we're 10 students or 9 students were engineers. And I think one was a data scientist. So traditionally, this is a role that used to be very technical. A lot of engineers or data people would become PMs. And there was this myth in Silicon Valley where you can't be a good PM if you don't know how to code. That's not true anymore. And we can definitely discuss more about what are some of those trends that support what I just said. Mostly the rise of tools that are no code, low code, that are empowering creators, no matter their background, to really build something very visual without any technical expertise. But still, being a software engineer obviously helps, will give you an edge, because at the end of the day, you're going to spend a lot of time with engineers. And these are at least 1/3 of the PMs these days. The other 2/3 usually come from these other backgrounds. Entrepreneurship, so you see a lot of founders who turn PMs at larger organizations, or PMs that at some point decide to build something for themselves as founders. By the way, I'm using the word PM, and I just realized that in this group, there might be a lot of project managers or program managers. So excuse me, what I mean by PM is product manager, okay? And I don't want to start an argument about who owns those two letters. Consulting, it's huge. This is something that really depends on location. So Silicon Valley traditionally has a lot of engineers, so people with technical backgrounds, but the East Coast, New York, we get tons of management consultants. And it makes sense, because some of the skills that they have in terms of fast thinking, analytical, client-facing, all of those skills really apply to the product management context. They obviously have to pick up the technical chops, but it's not the end of the world. We've seen a lot of project/program managers, Scrum Masters, business analysts, data analysts, people who are already doing some of the job. We get tons of project managers who say, hey, I think I'm a product manager. And if you really analyze what they do at their day-to-day, maybe at least 50% of the stuff they do, it's actually product. Some companies don't even have that role. So in that case, the project or the program manager is wearing that hat. But I think there is more and more structure around product these days, and especially larger organizations where the product team is not just one product manager. You can see project managers supporting the function. In general, if you ask me what would be the main difference between a project manager and a product manager, so going back to this slide, I would say the product manager technically owns the vision for the product. It's the person who's coordinating these three different groups of design, business, and engineering. Project management traditionally has been more understood as a part of the engineering team. It's more of a tactical role that is in charge of controlling the execution, obviously managing deviations, but literally spending more time with the engineers. Obviously, there are project managers that can work in business teams such as marketing or in design, but for the most part, most of the project managers that I've seen in software teams tend to spend more time with engineers. And that's why I think that project managers make great product managers, because you already know how to do a very important part of the job. So going back to those most common paths, and then we are seeing a rise in what I call product, this is not the right slide. This one, sales, design. Like, I don't want to disqualify anybody, literally, because I've even had attorneys that turn PMs. I've had real estate brokers, civil engineers. That's not the most common path, of course, but my point is you can do it. It's not going to be easy either, but you can do it. What are other PM roles out there? Well, these are other options that I've seen. Let me see. Yeah, so I just show you the five more popular ones, and then there are other paths that I saw. Designers, unfortunately, there are not enough designers turning into product. I don't know why, because design is a huge part and very critical piece of the entire puzzle. But I see most of the PMs coming from either engineering or business, however you want to define both. Something to note is that the product team is not just the product managers. I think a lot of people at the beginning was confused. I got a lot of students saying, hey, I want to be a product manager at Google. And like, why? Well, because Google sounds cool. You know, they have all this free food. This is before the pandemic, right? Like, you see all the perks and they seem to be having fun and whatnot. And it seems like that the only way to join the product team is by being a product manager. And that's not true at all. There are a lot of people who work in the product team who are product marketers, product designers, project managers, as we discussed before. So this visual tends to apply to larger teams. Because, as I said, first of all, if you are in a smaller startup, there is not even a PM. Assuming you have at least 5 engineers, where 5 to 10 engineers, you hire your first full-time PM, at some point, that's not going to be enough. Because if you think of everything as a product, the website is a product, the mobile app is a product, the Apple TV app is another product. At some point, you're going to see yourself with a portfolio of products, and then you might need more people to own different lines, or maybe there are other structures where the whole product team oversees all the lines. But the point is, the product team is more than product managers, and they tend to have some of these stepping stones, as I call it, which is people who are good connectors between different teams. So usually, if you come from a strong engineering background and you are thinking about product management, project management or technical project management might be a really good fit for you, at least as a first step. Same thing applies if you come from a design background. Product design might be a good stepping stone. Now, if you come from an engineering background, you shouldn't apply to become a product designer. That's not the path for you. Like, usually think about what is it that you can leverage today that can add value, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. If you try to move multiple positions at a time, it's just very complicated, because the same way there are a lot of companies hiring these days, it's also very competitive. So business is kind of weird, right? Because it's a very broad term. Some companies would think of business as marketing. Other organizations may have marketing and sales, and maybe they include other functions such as success or support. So for the most part, the most common term that I've seen is product marketing. This is a non-technical role, which is part of the product team, although in some cases it's part of the marketing team, but let's keep it simple. Product marketing, let's assume it's part of the product team. And these people usually leverage their business background to support the PMs to define what's going to be, what we need to build next. And then as something is about to be shipped, they also need to do the internal communication with all the different stakeholders and other teams to make sure that they are ready for a launch. So they don't usually have that much interaction with engineers and designers. They focus more on the before and after of the cycle, while a project manager is more involved in the day-to-day with engineers as well as a product designer. By the way, I know that I'm throwing a lot of concepts out there. So if you think that something needs clarification and you have a pressing question right now, unmute and I'll be happy to take care of you. Let's talk about the career path, because another thing that happened when I started is that everyone was so excited about breaking into product, getting their first product management job. But then what? What's going to be your career? There wasn't really that much definition, really. So we created a path to try to simplify things. Obviously, each company is different, and I actually think that this requires a little bit of comments, because I've seen other options. Let's start from the beginning. Starting from the top, APM stands for Associate Product Manager. Now, not all the companies have this position. So if that company doesn't have that position, the entry-level position would be Product Manager. So what companies have an APM? Usually large tech companies. Google was the pioneer. They created a product school inside their company. Well, they actually started before product school. The hypothesis here was that usually this is the former VP of product at Google, who then became the CEO at Yahoo, Marissa Mayer. She said, okay, we need business people who understand engineers. Schools are not preparing these people. So we have a ton of engineers here who are kind of thinking business. What if we train them on product? They created this type of selective program to rotate people from within, but that was very small. They would only accept 30 to 40 people per year. And then other large companies took notes. So now you can see Facebook, Yelp, LinkedIn, Uber, Airbnb. Most of the big tech cool companies offer an APM program. Each of them have their own parameters. Some of them offer this to employees who want to transition into product, mostly engineers. Some do that for external hires. This is usually graduates who come from a CS degree or an MBA, and they are excellent, and they just need to be trained for 6 to 18 months before they get extended an offer to join as a product manager. So, hey, if you have the opportunity to get accepted, I think they pay you to learn, and most likely they will extend you a PM offer at the end. So that's pretty cool. But obviously that doesn't scale, and that's not for everybody. So the way I think of product school is an APM program outside of any company. We're agnostic to a company. We still teach you all those frameworks, and then you can apply them to wherever you want to go. Product manager. This is still an individual contributor role, even though it has the word manager in it. In reality, you are not really managing anyone. Engineers would report to a CTO, designers will report to a head of design or a CDO, and then same thing for marketers to a CMO. So you are here coordinating all the different groups. And the next step up is senior product manager. So usually the biggest difference between a product manager and a senior product manager, other than money, is that you would take care of either more impactful products, or you have a larger, I would say, portfolio. But in reality, both are individual contributor roles. Don't think that as a senior product manager, you are going to be managing product managers, because that's not the case. Now, here's the thing. Now you have two options. You can either continue growing as an individual contributor, or you can grow as what I would call people manager. That's the point where you are actually going to start managing others. And there's no right or wrong answer, but it's important to know your options. If you choose to continue growing as an individual contributor, that's typically called principal product manager. You are going to get paid more than a senior PM. You are obviously going to take the hardest challenges because you are an expert in your domain. You know everybody, and that's almost like the god of product. Like, people go to you because they know you know everything, and you're amazing. And then you also don't want any direct reports, which is fair. Now, if you want to grow as a people manager, the next step up is called director of product. Sorry, before that, in some companies, they have group product manager, then director of product, VP of product, chief product officer. Not all the companies have a chief product officer, by the way. We released a report called The Future of Product Management 2 weeks ago, not even 10 days ago, just to ask this question. Does your company have a CPO? And only a third of the 1,500 people who replied, and they were all product leaders, only a third of the companies actually had a CPO. So that means there's a lot of room for growth here. In some companies, still product seems to be part of a marketing team or part of a technology team. with reports to CMO or CTO respectively. But I'm glad to see that more companies are becoming product-led. More companies have a CPO and ultimately a CEO that comes from a product background, which is the final confirmation as why this is important in your organization. I put CEO at the end because in many cases the CEO is the ultimate product person. Depending if you are the smallest company or not, the pay will range. But think of Facebook, where CEO is still involved in product reviews. Microsoft, Google, Dropbox, Airbnb, a lot of the CEOs and founders come from a product background, which I think it's good for all of us as an industry. If you want more details about the comp ranges, I would recommend going to glassdoor.com because that really changes. So I can give you the last data point. I checked this information today. For a product manager in San Francisco, median is around $143,000 per year, which that's not bad. But obviously that would change depending on where you are. Cool. Well, let's talk about types of products because this wasn't that clear either. Like the same example I put before about, I want to be a PM at Google. It's almost like, just give me something and I'll take it because it's Google, right? Well, even within Google, just think about the insane amount of different products they have. Some of them are B2C, some of them are B2B, some of them are internal. Google is famous for building most of their stuff instead of buying or using SaaS products. So you may be building a task management tool just for Google employees, or a tool for Google employees to order lunch. Like literally, they have tons of products, and because the employees are the users, they have enough volume to justify all of that. So just things to keep in mind. That's a way to look at it. Startups versus large companies. Some companies are more technical than others. So if you're working on a IoT device, let's say Amazon Alexa, the interface of that device is it's just an API interface. It's not a visual interface. So they may have less designers and more data scientists and people who understand algorithms. So the reason why I'm saying all of this is because if you're thinking about a job, getting a PM job, either your first job or another job, it's important to leverage what you have already. It's going to be almost impossible to switch context and go from, oh, I'm a B2C product manager. No, I'm a B2C, let's say, marketing manager, and I'm going to become a B2B product manager at once. It just doesn't happen. If you want to make that switch, you probably have to do that in different steps. And it's just how it works. Like some people would say, no, I am obsessed with becoming a PM. My next move has to be that. Well, then I would probably recommend similar industries, similar products, so at least you can leverage some of the stuff that you've been doing. Now, if you say, no, I absolutely hate my industry, I just hate it, but I still want to be a PM one day, well, maybe you can consider a horizontal move where you continue as a marketing manager, maybe in a different industry. And then from there, you can try to move into product. Trying to do those two steps at once is going to be really, really tough. Not impossible, but pretty hard. And by the way, the same product might fit into multiple categories. Let me give you another example. Let's say you work in marketing at an e-commerce company that sells shoes, like Zappos, and that company has a mobile app. Well, technically, this could be treated as a B2C product, right? Because you are selling to end consumers. At the same time, this could be considered an e-commerce site. And e-commerce has a very specific dynamic, which is different than a marketplace, which is different than a SaaS product. And if you are working on the mobile app, this could also be considered a mobile product versus a web product or a desktop product. I'm saying all of this because if you're thinking about applying for a job, it's probably important to phrase how you're going to position yourself. Like if I'm applying, to say, continuing with the same example, I'm applying for a company that has a mobile app, then the way I would justify that I'm a good fit is because I've been building or contributing to the mobile product at Zappos. While if I were to apply to another e-commerce company, I would probably leverage a different angle, or maybe both. But the point is, as a recruiter, I'm going to try to understand why you are here. And if you don't have a product manager job already, most likely I'm going to try to disqualify you, just because I have many other people that have the product manager title. So it's very important to phrase your accomplishments in a product way, not just in a technical or in a marketing or a design way, or whatever your background is way, basically. And we can discuss that, and maybe during the Q&A, if any of you have specific situations, we can go deep. And now let's talk about the perfect PM, right? Because yes, it sounds great from the outside. You are in the middle, communicating with engineers, designers, marketers, setting up the vision, but it's not that sexy. The reality is you are still reporting up, most likely to a leadership or executive team. Your CEO probably has a lot of strong opinions, which means that they are jeopardizing your roadmap. And also, you have a lot of pressure to ship fast and on time and on quality. It sounds familiar to project management. So you're wearing these so many different hats. And sometimes I think, why do people want to do this? Like, it sounds great from the outside, but you'll be surprised how many people who are working in product, but someone like, you know what? I just want an easier life, and I don't blame them. But hey, at the end of the day, this is addictive. I think we are in the driver's seat. We are the ones deciding what's going to be built next. We are the ones having access to the bigger picture, communicating with people. So for me, I'm biased, but it's fascinating. I just don't know what else I will be doing. So at the end of the day, technology is changing, right? And if your team is using Python or JavaScript or Ruby on Rails, whatever it is, from a business standpoint, you need to understand the trade-offs. But at the end of the day, what you are doing is working with people. Yes, you may have some decent technical background to understand how things are built, but you are all about working with people. And for me, that's fascinating. And that gives us so much opportunity to then go to different industries, to different things. Like, you pretty much acquired a mindset. And that's incredible to me. Like, I apply a product mindset to where I want, how you organize your wedding, where you want to go traveling, what you want to do. Like, it's like, okay, give me the problem. Let's really nail the problem and really understand what's the goal here. And then let's try to come up with solutions instead of jumping too fast into the solution mode, which is what a lot of people tend to do. Anyway, let's talk about the top 3 skills. And this is based on data. We've graduated over 20,000 people so far. So we wanted to understand, what is it that makes some people more successful than others? Why are some people getting jobs faster? Why are people getting paid more? And it comes down to 3 things. One is a technical background, the other one is domain expertise, and the final one is the communication skills, not necessarily in that order. So let me break them down for you. Technical background. What do I mean by this? Well, let's start with what I don't mean by this. You don't need to have a computer science degree. You don't. You don't need to know how to code. You don't need to be a data scientist. You don't need a PhD in math. Now, what you need is to really understand the product at every level, from what the user wants all the way down to what makes your engineers tick. So you can have a conversation with them and earn their respect and really motivate them. Because the reality is that what makes your engineers tick is different than what makes your designers tick, or what makes you tick, or your CEO tick. And you need to understand that so you can phrase the messaging and make sure that they also get the access to the full picture. When I was an engineer, there's nothing I hated more than just being assigned a list of tasks to code. As if my manager assumed that as an engineer, I don't have ideas or I don't have a say, I just have to code. And I hated that. So now as a product person, I can empathize with my engineering team. And I don't claim to be a good engineer anymore, but I think I have enough technical expertise and curiosity to go deep if I need to learn something, and for them to know that I'm one of them. So obviously, if you come from an engineering background, you have an edge. Now, if you don't have an engineering background, you can still be technical enough. And we can discuss more about where the bar is, because obviously in some super technical companies, as Amazon Alexa, you pretty much have to be an engineer. But most of the companies, an e-commerce website, a SaaS product, a community product, they might be looking for people from different backgrounds. So, part of you as a job searcher, if that's the case, is to do your due diligence. Because the title is the same from the outside, but it's very, very different depending on each company. So, when I get people saying, "Oh, I want to work at Google, Uber, Netflix," great, fantastic, but like, why? Just because they're fancy and they pay well? I don't blame you, but what do you bring to the table? What are going to make those companies call you? And part of it is a numbers game. You have to do your research and find companies larger or smaller that might fit the bill. Yes. So how can you get this type of technical background? I got people saying, do I need to go back to school? Not really. You can consume a lot of free resources online. You can build something on the side. Again, to the point I made at the very beginning about no code tools, you can use something like it's a company called Bubble or Webflow or Squarespace and try and play around with it, because that will teach you so much, even if you're doing it for fun, right? It doesn't need to be a pretty product. You need to put it on the market and start selling anything. You can just do it for fun. I know people who participate in hackathons where they wear the hat of the PM for a few days and collaborate with people. That's just fascinating. You need to put yourself in those shoes. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. Having mentors is definitely something that I encourage everyone to do. The tricky thing with mentors is that you also need to know what you want. And just having coffees for the sake of it with smart people, it only takes you so far. You also need to deliver and be consistent, and nobody's going to do the job for you. So if you're doing the job, having a mentor or a coach is fantastic, because that would push you, but they are not going to do the job for you. Asking your engineering team, I think, is extremely underrated, really underrated. I remember those days where people were working in offices and you would look at a screen of an engineer and so black, that dark, people are typing numbers there and you're thinking, oh my God, they must be doing something so weird. But they're just humans, and what they do is in some cases not rocket science, and they just they'll be more than happy to talk about their work, and it's a good thing to care. The same way, maybe if someone asks you about what you do, it's a good thing you take it positively, because someone wants to learn more and be more helpful. So do not self-reject and think that engineers don't answer your questions or your Slack messages. And a few more tactical things that I think would help. I mentioned building your own website, mobile app, side project, whatever it is. Doesn't even need to be with code. I just gave you a few examples of codes or of tools that are no code, and there are so many others. You can contribute to an open source project if you are into that. If you have a GitHub or GitHub account, you can do that. I know some CEOs who are also kind of fixing bugs still because they care so much and come from a technical background. Just whatever it is, but do something, and something that works for me is to block time. It just doesn't happen magically, because tonight, for example, I had to prepare for this. I had to put it on the calendar with enough time. Otherwise, it would never happen. Like there are certain, my kids are on the other room and I could be there with them. My wife would love to watch a Netflix movie later. So I think it's important to do all of that. Obviously, family time, friends time, well, not too much friends time these days, but just block time for yourself. I think blocking time for learning or for building is really, really important. And if you're busy, which I guess you are, just an hour a week can go a really long way. Anyway, just food for thought. Second point was domain expertise or business acumen. What I mean by this is that you don't need an MBA either. Same way you don't need a CS degree. You also don't need to be a professional salesperson. What you really, really need to know is your market, is your users. You really care about your product. Not all the product managers can be customers of their own product, especially in B2B context, it's not the same, but that definitely helps. Like if you are the user of your own product, you will have product market fit. That means that you care. Like nobody's ever going to care more about the product than the product manager. You can't expect that your engineers and your designers will say like, yes, Carlos, let's go. We believe in the roadmap. You can do it. That's not going to happen. You are there for them. So you better believe in it. And it's not something you can force. If you don't care about the company, if you don't believe in the need that your product is trying to solve, maybe that's not the right fit for you, and that's okay. Plenty of opportunities out there. And I think we talk a lot about product market fit. Probably we don't talk enough about company fit. Just because it's so in demand, it seems like we take whatever, but it's just not a good option. Like good PMs, really good PMs, they know their worth. And honestly, I've seen people that might take a different title at a company that they love more, or they believe more, than being a PM at a startup just because they give you the title to hire you, but in reality, you are doing everything by bad product management. So keep that in mind, because especially as you move into your, mid career, these things tend to resonate much more as you start having more and more responsibilities. At the very beginning, my first engineering job, I just didn't care. I just didn't know anything. I was like, okay, just give me anything and I'll code for you. But at some point, you're like, wait a second. I wanted to be more intentional with my next steps. And the good thing is that, especially now working remotely, you don't need to be in Silicon Valley. And not only companies in Silicon Valley are hiring product managers. This is not a secret anymore. There are PMs all around the world and across all the industries. This is not just for high tech. So let's talk a little bit more about how you can acquire some of this business acumen or domain expertise. Well, I'm a big fan of using the products that you like. There is no replacement for that. I think as you play around with those products, you develop a sense of what you like, what you don't. You start understanding patterns, and you know why next time you go to an e-commerce site to buy whatever, there should be a pattern that applies to a very different product. Like, for example, the other day I was buying a shirt on a website. There is a reason why the button is in a certain position. There is a reason why there are always, certain steps, from the list of the items to the item description to the contact information and so on. So do not underestimate what it is to just spend time using products that you like and products that you don't like. Industry-related content. This event, I think, is a good example of it. There are many others. Most of them are free, which, it's a good opportunity, especially these days. There is no excuse. You can show up in your pajamas and literally be in front of different experts in whatever topic you are passionate about. Meeting people, it's cool. I used to be afraid of that. As an engineer, nobody taught me how to speak in public. I wasn't supposed to interact, to ask questions. And then when I moved to the US, they gave me points for participation. Like, wait a second. So if I raise my hand and I ask a question, you give me up to 10% of my grade? This is amazing. So I'm joking, but like the fact that they were pushing me to speak in public, to ask questions, to not be afraid, it's really, really powerful, because this is one of the dirty little secrets of Silicon Valley. A lot of people say yes. If you ask the right way and probably to the right number to enough people, a lot of them will say yes. And a lot of them will give you that first call, that first coffee. Then it's up to you to decide what you do with it. But, do not self-reject. If you think there's someone you want to learn from, and obviously you have to be smart around how you ping them and why, and try to show value in a short space of time. But you'll be surprised. If you haven't tried, this would be probably the only thing I would ask you to remember from this conversation. Like, a lot of people say yes, do not self-reject. And last but not least, there's a lot of good content out there in small and big communities. I'm a fan of smaller communities. So obviously Product School is a very large community. We have over 1 million members, but we still keep very, very small groups or cohorts where people can discuss very specific topics. And that's not just the Product School. There are many other places out there. So Quora.com could be a good place. Reddit is another good one. LinkedIn is becoming huge for community. So just check out what's going on. All of that stuff is free. And in general, you probably go from quantity to quality. So that's everywhere. Like when you're trying to learn something, you probably don't know what you don't know. When you start getting more into that and spending 1 or 2 hours per week, you start understanding, okay, I want more of this, less of that. And then you start filtering. But without those first experiments, without saying yes by default, without leaning forward, without asking, then it's just impossible to learn those next steps. So, again, no MBA required by any means here. How can you prove that you actually have domain expertise in a specific company? Well, obviously, if you work at a competitor or you work in the same industry, that's huge. That's huge, even if it's in a different title. As I said before, with the example of the marketing manager or the engineer, whatever, if you work in an e-commerce site that sells shoes online, you should know a lot about e-commerce, regardless of your title. And that's something that you can leverage. You use certain products, even if you don't work in an e-commerce site for shoes. If you like shopping and you are an ultimate expert in buying things online, and you understand all the intricacies and the difference between paying upfront and paying with loans and referral codes and mobile versus web and Facebook Connect, like there's so many little details that go into e-commerce that you can just learn as a user. That is fascinating. Of course, this is more complicated in a B2B context. If you are working or you want to work for a company that sells car insurance and you don't have a car, you can't fake it, right? Well, maybe you can sign up, but there is very little you can do. And then find smart way to connect with hiring managers or product managers or just in general experts in the topic that you like. I said before that a lot of people say yes, which is really cool. But the reason why they say yes, it varies, right? One is because probably someone said yes for them back in the day, but also they're not stupid. They may say yes once, but they might not say yes twice if they don't see anything, any reaction. What I mean by this is that you may get a 30-minute call with someone, but you need to be prepared, right? Like you need to think really well about what can you offer to this person. And I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about passion. I'm talking about, can you help with something? Can you take anything off their plate? Do you have a common friend? Is there, I don't know, do you follow them on Twitter and you are constantly liking the stuff they do? Like, there has to be something there that they like, right? And ego is an important part of it. And I'm not thinking about manufacturing that just to trick someone into just taking a call, but truly, if you want people to say yes more than once, there has to be something for both parts. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And that's the tricky thing about mentors. Like, I don't think you need a ton of mentors. I personally think that it's good to know a lot of people, but in order to have a deep relationship with some, you just can't have it with a lot. So maybe after going from quantity to quality and figuring out a way to get a couple of yeses and then knowing exactly type of people that connects with you and that you like, maybe it's good to overinvest on one or two instead of trying to continue going wide and just having more and more first-time coffees with other people. That would be my 2 cents there. I still mentor people. I do it mostly for product school alums, just because that's such a passionate community that I was part of. And some of them, I met them early on in their career that I'm still very proud and I want to continue supporting them. And I also have my own mentors. I don't think this game ever ends. And sometimes you also want to graduate your own mentors, which is, it's fair. That means that you're growing, right? And some of the advice and the people that was helpful to you at the beginning might be not as helpful, or there may be other people or other type of advice that you need. So I think this concept of lifelong learning is fascinating, because I cannot give you the playbook, right? For some people, it's about reading books, watching movies, practicing. For others, it's just about getting mentors. Whatever it is, my point is, if you are serious about this, you have to commit time. There is no silver bullet. And you also don't have to commit too much time, because the point of lifelong learning is that you can do this on the side. You don't have to put on hold your life or your job. Let's talk about the last point here, which is communication skills. This is tricky, because you might not need a lot of this at the very beginning. To be honest, at the very beginning, breaking into product requires a lot of hard skills. It requires understanding the lingo. It requires understanding the process. It requires understanding the tools. And probably you come from one of those three areas that I mentioned at the beginning: engineering, business, or design. So you probably are very good at one of those three things, and then good enough at the other two. But as you grow and you start interacting with more and more stakeholders, and hopefully start getting promotions and becoming a people manager, it's all about communication skills. Because technically, you're not going to be the one in the weeds anymore if you don't want to. So it doesn't require to be a public speaker or a book author. It does require to have empathy and interest for people, truly caring about them. You cannot manufacture a meeting for too long and try to be a good manager and schedule a one-on-one just because the playbook says, oh, you have to have one-on-ones with your direct reports. That just doesn't fly. So how do you become a better communicator? Honestly, I wish I had a better answer for you, but by communicating, by acquiring experience. And the good news about this is that PMs are not the only communicators. You can become a better communicator at your current job, as a project manager, as a marketer, as an engineer, as a designer, because you can do it. There's not a communicator manager. Okay, now you're in charge of talking with people. Now, but let's try to break it down and try to be more specific here. I would rather choose not in person these days, but definitely speak with someone on the phone or hopefully via video conference instead of sending an email. Emails can be misunderstood if you are working across different time zones and you don't have the chance to get back to someone within a certain number of hours. That just creates unnecessary tension. So I'm a big fan of doing this communication, even though it doesn't scale. I can think of something more important for me as a manager than making sure that my team is on the same page. So if that requires an additional call, that is what it is. And sometimes I don't want to do it because I'm lazy or because I don't want, it's going to be a difficult conversation. I have to give feedback to someone, but it really changes the game. It builds more trust. And there are some tools that can help in case you cannot do this in real time. I'm a big fan of this tool called Loom, Loom. It's actually free, integrates with Slack very well, and allows you to send video messages. It can also allows you to share the screen. So I use it for multiple purposes, from reporting bugs to explaining something, because I'm just faster and easier to communicate over voice than text. Whatever it is, I would just think twice before sending that email and see if you can replace that for a conversation. Same thing with long emails. Like, people just don't have time to read these days. So the conversations are becoming much more shorter. They are happening on Slack. They are becoming, like more about talking points than really lengthy explanations. So in general, something that works well with me is to read my email before I send it. It might sound silly, but sometimes it's not just about fixing typos. It's really about understanding the tone of the conversation. I try not to send tricky emails late at night when I might be tired. So, or I try to time my email. So if I am going to send an email tonight, I may schedule it to be sent tomorrow in the morning. Those things actually help, especially that my team is distributed. Sometimes it's a national holiday tomorrow in a different part of the world. And people may think that you're not respecting them if you try to send them a long email just because it's not a holiday where you live. So, this type of intercultural communication is becoming more and more relevant. I try to be aware of the context. Of course, I mess up all the time, but what I try not to mess up is, one, trying to do as many Zoom calls and phone calls instead of emails. And when it needs to be an email, just because it has to be documented, I try to use Slack over email when possible, just to keep the conversation flowing and try to be more respectful of other people's responsibilities. Again, email is not going away, but it's definitely moving. Other things that would help you acquire, like just the lingo and know what's going on, like really participate in certain online communities, Medium, Substack, Reddit, Quora, Twitter, LinkedIn, just to name a few. You can build your brand, you can participate. Doesn't need to be as a blogger. I'm not saying, go out there and start writing articles like crazy to practice your communication style. You can start following others, and maybe you can ask questions, you can answer questions on a discussion forum. You can just start tweeting. You can just see if that resonates with you. I'm not saying you have to be a professional social media person these days just to fake it, but if there's a topic that you're interested in learning, you can probably find your community and you can find a way to start being more active. Again, it just takes a little bit of commitment at the very beginning. It's like working out, right? Like you need to put it on the calendar, you need to do it, even though you don't like it, but then the more you do it, the more you start getting the hang of it. So it's definitely helpful. I've hired tons of people through social media and online. I've done a lot of partnerships this way. I've done incredible things, and sometimes it takes years, and there's no clear ROI. And there shouldn't always be an ROI, but that's something definitely to keep in mind, because this is not just for fun, to have enough followers or whatever. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. And the last thing I want to say about this communication style point is that you have to do it consistently. The only way you can become a better communicator is by doing it, by failing, by trying again. Same thing with writing, same thing with just speaking in front of customers. There's no replacement. And what I'm doing today is helping me. Hopefully it's helping you as well, but it's definitely helping me become a better communicator. And I think there's no secret sauce other than just putting yourself out there and doing whatever it takes. At the end of the day, that's the role of the product manager, doing whatever it takes. So just to wrap things up, I want to show you the last slide of this presentation, which is the career, the PM job process. Kind of what is the standard step-by-step guide here, and how many companies or leads you need to have on top of the funnel in order to get 1 to 2 offers. So if you look at the left side of this presentation, you'll see it says 30 to 50 resumes sent. Sounds like a lot, but it is necessary. If you are, especially if you're trying to get your first product management job, it's a numbers game. Even if you have the right skills, even if you have the right connections, you still need to get out there, and you're still going to get rejected a lot of times. So putting 30 to 50 companies out there and treating yourself like a product, it's going to be important. Just going out there and start clicking on apply now, apply now, apply now, doesn't work. Mostly, and this is another dirty little secret you probably know, 80% of the jobs are not on job boards. 80% of the jobs are through referrals, recruiters. You have to know the right people. So it goes back to building relationships, not only on social media, but one-on-one with people, just building content, nurturing your brand, and treating yourself like a product. Trying to understand, what are those 30 to 50 companies? Am I talking about the flashy companies that everybody knows about? Or am I really talking about companies in the industries that I'm passionate about, in the locations that I care, or time zones that I care? The right comp expectation, really companies that understand the background that I have. Because sometimes you are a designer, you can't just apply to your first PM job at an AI company because there is no design interface. So, those are things to keep in mind. And it may take some time before you really push and start applying, but it's an investment. And then you have the standard process where there's a phone screen, usually done by a non-PM, usually a recruiter. Then at some point, obviously, those in-person meetings are being replaced by video calls. Things like your virtual background makes a huge difference. I wouldn't say I've hired people because of their virtual backgrounds or backgrounds, but I definitely disqualified people because of their backgrounds. And nothing against their houses or anything, but I think it tells you a lot about the person. Like the other day, I was doing an interview with someone who had everything. It was a mess, like a total mess. And I was hiring someone for a project manager role. And I'm thinking, if you can't even organize your room, how are you going to organize my team or my project? So here's something that can help. If you can't, just use a virtual background. That's totally fine. Like the fact that you are at home doesn't mean that you can't be professional. Obviously, nobody's expecting you to be in a full suit, right? Like pretending that this is an office, but this is your shot. And you should take this seriously. At least from bottom up. Something that is becoming more and more popular in product management interviews is take-home assignment. This is very popular in design interviews or coding interviews. As an engineer, we can see your code, we can see your GitHub profile, we can ask you to do an exercise. Same thing as a designer, we can look at your portfolio. But what about as a product manager? So if technically you don't code, design, or sell, what are you going to show? Well, a lot of deliverables that you own as a PM. Roadmap, you create wireframes, you create the KPI dashboard, you create user stories. There's so many different things that go into the product development process. So some companies may ask you to show certain documents. If you have them, obviously you don't have to break any IP, but most likely they will ask you to create something like that. So if you've gone through the motion before, if you understand how to break down a problem into smaller pieces, really ask questions to get to the bottom of things, to really be clear on the problem before you start jumping into solutions. If you can use a no-code tool to create a roadmap, if then you can present your potential solution, you are basically touching on a lot of points. When I hire product managers, we ask them to prepare something, just because it's a really good exercise to understand not only how they think, but how they communicate. And then hopefully you get to the final stage where there is an offer received. Between the first interview, if it's done by a non-PM, at some point you are also going to be interviewed by PMs. Some companies may do more than 10 interviews. Google is crazy with that. There are other companies that may do less than that, maybe 2 to 4. It really depends on the size and the position, but something to keep in mind, this is exhausting. This takes a lot of time on top of other things you have going on. So again, going back to blocking time for this, treating yourself like a product, finding a job is a job itself. And then hopefully you get a few offers. This again might change depending on your experience. Hopefully people with existing product experience don't need as many companies on top, or if they start with as many companies, they're probably going to get more job offers. But I think it's good reality check to know that, hey, everything I told you is great, but this is not easy. You have to put in the work. Now, if you want to get started, you want to join our community for free, I would encourage you to do so. Just go to our website, productschool.com/free. And I would recommend you to download the book, the product book, because I think it's a really good resource to kind of break down every single piece that I just mentioned and show you how to create some of those different deliverables. We have events twice a day, and each event is led by a different product leader. So we try to cover different topics. And in general, we try to be very active on social media. So we eat what we preach. As we say, we drink our own champagne. So if you need to connect with me offline, well, online, but one-on-one, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find my team. We're always trying to level up the playing field. And this is not just for paid students. Like over 90% of our resources and over 90% of our users are actually free. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So thank you. And I'll be happy to take up any of your questions.
Well, thank you, Carlos. We do have several questions, and I'll try to go through them if Gopal and Ron will help me. And then we can open up, it's not that many people, and we can open up the mics. But I'll go at the beginning. It says, so this is from Julia. I have a question. I am a brand manager. Is being a product manager different, and how? What could be my challenge getting into a PM job?
Julia, I actually wrote an article on that because you're not alone in this. There are a lot of people with that question. It's pretty much the same, by the way. So in consumer packaged goods, CPG companies, they don't really have the role of a product manager. And if they do, they usually call it brand manager. So there's a lot of similarities. Are you working in a CPG company? Oh, okay. Then that's the short answer. Now, other examples for other people in other industries. So gaming, or in, they usually call it producers. So that's something to keep in mind. Some companies don't have the role of the product manager, so they have a project manager doing that as well. So it's always good to know exactly what's happening in your company, because, there's still a lot of work to be done.
Cool. And then same person, will getting an Agile coach education benefit being a PM or not really?
Good question. I get similar questions, such as not only an Agile coach, but should I get an MBA? Should I do this course? Should I read this book? And my answer is usually do it. Yes. I mean, I think that learning is going to help you no matter what. I don't think it's going to make your life worse. Now, obviously, to my point on going from quantity to quality, at some point, I think you also want to be more picky to understand what that next step is going to lead you to. So Agile is still a big part of product management. Most of the companies these days, most of them, not all of them, they use an Agile methodology. And a lot of the product management work is actually project management. So the more you know about the nitty-gritty details on how to work with your engineers and how to understand their roadmap and help them, the better. Now, that's probably not going to be enough. That I might say. Like at some point, you're also going to need to learn more about design, marketing, overall product strategy. But learning in general is a good thing. Just make sure that you do your due diligence. And these days, one of the good things about social media is that this is not a black box anymore, right? You can find who your instructor is. You can find other students. If the company doesn't want to give you access to them, you can still find them online. So I would definitely encourage you to do your due diligence. That's something that we personally encourage our students to do. So if you Google us or just put product school on LinkedIn, you will see tons of people who they list that on their work experience that either went through our program or they teach with us. And I like most of them will grade you a line. You don't even need to put them on the phone, and they will give you thumbs up or thumbs down about their experience. So that could be a good angle.
Question from Christina. How many companies have whiteboard type of exercises or challenges during, like a second interview or something? And I know Google does this a lot. They put you through the ringer.
Yeah. I mean, they are insane. I mentioned that sometimes they can do more than 10 interviews, believe it or not. I mean, not all the interviews will be in separate days. So maybe in one same day, you get to meet 3 or 4 folks. But I would say at least 50% of the companies will want to see something. And these days you have no excuses not to show something, because I love personally, when I wear the recruiter hat, I love when someone shares their screen. I love it. Sometimes maybe I have to ask them to do it, but when they do it voluntarily, when they're like, let me show you this roadmap, or if I ask a question and they share a whiteboard, a virtual whiteboard, there are tools such as Miro or Mural. I'm going to put the links here so you can check them out. They are virtual whiteboards. I use them internally as well for teams, for brainstorming, for project management, for a bunch of things. Literally shows you that you are proactive, that you don't use Zoom as an excuse not to build something, that you have ideas, that you want to co-create with the other person. So obviously it helps when you've done it before. And that's why I think it's important, especially in product management, to build something, even if it's not official, even if you don't have the official product manager title and you're not working on a public product, you can build your own portfolio. You can build your own website. You can participate in a hackathon. You can build something for fun, even if it's without code, with one of the no-code tools, because that will, first of all, give you confidence. That will help you talk about something that you know. And I know people that even used other websites such as Upwork and freelancer.net to hire developers and designers just to build something that also taught them how to collaborate with different stakeholders. I think these days there is no excuse to say, well, I haven't built anything because nobody gave me the product manager title. So I'm also looking for those type of signs of curiosity, like how bad do you want this?
Cool. So these two questions are similar. What does it really mean when they say after an interview, the PM role, you're overqualified? And then can you give an example of an assignment task? So you go through the process and they ask you, about those examples that you talked about, and you don't have a software development background.
Yes, let me see. So example,
First one is like you're overqualified, and the second one is an example if you're not, technical.
Well, it's hard to overqualify, I would say, right? I mean, it's a good problem. Maybe it's true, and okay, well, you overqualify, but most likely it's not that case, not the reason. Even if the recruiters say that, because at the end of the day, like product managers are so needed that it's not that, oh, I don't have enough problems in my company. Well, you are amazing at solving problems. I think you can add value to my company. Maybe you're too expensive, but not overqualified. No, with that being said, let's talk about specific examples or questions that you may face that require you to show something. Typical question is, okay, well, we have a product and we want to launch this new feature. How would you go about it? It's a very open-ended question. A lot of the questions you're going to get don't have a right or wrong answer. What's not right, it's basically to try to jump into the solution. So this is number one mistake in a PM interview, is to try to brainstorm with the recruiter, because they probably thought about that before they ask you the question. And nobody's hiring you for your beautiful ideas. Everyone has ideas. They're hiring you for your capacity to get things done. So my reaction to any of those questions, or another question would be, well, we have this product in the US, and now we want to expand to Asia. How would you do it? Even though it's a global product, it's online, that doesn't mean that you can just plug and play and start selling, right? So I would definitely take a step back and act as a PM. And the way I would do this is, okay, well, let's try to ask a few clarifying questions. for example, why? Like, what is the real need that we're trying to solve? What is the real user pain point? Like, why do you think that we need this feature? And it might sound counterintuitive, right? Because the recruiter already told you that they want to build this feature. But if you are able to take a step back and take control of the situation and really question that in a obviously respectful way, that might show that you are systems thinker instead of just do like an action reaction. Now, obviously, assuming that they say, well, because data prove that there is a big opportunity, users are saying that they want to buy more than one, let's say, a specific example. We have an e-commerce store. Users are able to buy one item at a time. We want to develop a feature to allow people to create a shopping cart so they can add multiple items and then check out only once. Why? Well, because we've seen that it's a bigger opportunity. People are coming back within hours to repeat the same process. So this is becoming annoying. We have a hypothesis that if we make it easier for them, the average price, the average ticket for checkout will be higher. We also think there will be less friction, X, Y, Z. Cool. Well, then I would try to, once we get aligned on the problem, I would try to create kind of a roadmap or a vision for that particular initiative. Because roadmaps or visions are not just for the entire company. You can also create a vision for the shopping cart. Say, okay, I get what you're saying and I understand the vision for this. And I agree, it would be amazing if we are able to offer all of these features all at once. But where can we start today? What are some of those requirements? So let me think how I would interact with engineers. Okay, so I'm going to talk with engineers. What are some of the main pain points here? What are some, and then you discuss that. Now let me think how I can interact with designers. And now let me think and interact with business people. I usually like to do that wrong. And then once I assume that I have enough information from all those different stakeholders, I'm also going to try to talk to users. Because yes, data can say some things, market trends can say whatever, but I also want as a PM to get some qualitative information from my user. And I think that's a really good, valid point to show that it's not just about believing what the CEO or the data is telling you, it's also about you spending some time with the user. Okay, we get all of these big ideas. It seems like we understand the opportunity. What I would love to do is to create, start creating maybe some wireframes with maybe create a design sprint, maybe some wireframes with my designers. If this is a take-home assignment, I would create some wireframes, something high level, just to prove kind of like how I can go from a vision all the way down to some sketches. I would also create a roadmap to identify different cycles that we expect, because yes, we have a big vision for the shopping cart, but we also have 1 or 2 months, and then we also need to maybe build an MVP of that feature to prove some of those hypotheses. And then if that's true, that the success metrics that we are defining are happening, then we can invest more and more resources into making that feature better, because I wouldn't spend too much time on like the vision for the month number 3. They're probably going to change once you start testing the MVP with your real users. So, some of those comments, some of that process, the systems thinking, it's exactly what you apply to any given context. And you can rely on visual tools to support your point. So I mentioned wireframing. You can use tools such as Figma, Balsamic, or InVision. For road mapping, you can use other tools such as, well, first of all, you can use something as simple as a PowerPoint. But if you want to prove that you're also into the product management world, maybe you want to use a more product-specific tool such as Product Board or Roadbank or AHA or Smart Sheets. There's so many that would also show that you don't need code to get your point across. Now, assuming that you have a roadmap, you have some wireframes, maybe you have a template of a PRD, which is what you would like for your engineers to build, then at some point you are going to have to present. And that's another big part of it. People will want to see you in action. And independently of the content, they also want to see how you communicate. So when you communicate to different stakeholders, again, I would always start with the problem. I would really make sure that people understand why you're building what you're building. And I would try to be as visual as possible with my presentation, and then have links to the specifics. So obviously, you don't want to share the entire PRD because people are going to die. But if you are you're giving me the highlights, and they say, okay, can we look at the PRD? Fantastic, let me go. But like, you have to be the storyteller. Like you have to give me enough, so I want a little bit more, but you want to make it easy for me, because if you give me all at once, then I'm going to turn down.
Thank you. We have two last questions, and then, but I do want to comment for those listening, is that it's very interesting, everything that Carlos has explained today and shared. When you look at the new Scrum Guide 2020 that came out in November, they actually have now introduced the idea of a product vision. They're very product oriented now. If you look at Scaled Agile Framework version 5, they're very product centric, and they have a very product organized view of how everything has to be oriented. Large scale Scrum has been product oriented since the beginning. So what I'm saying is that everyone is kind of playing catch up. So this has been going on. Now, Scrum's been around for 25 years. Agile's been around for 20. And like everything in life, we're learning and adapting and adjusting and evolving. So what we're seeing nowadays in all these frameworks and all the Agile things in the world is product. This notion of product is becoming and customer is becoming a centralized version of pulling gravity. It's creating gravity to pull everything together for an organization and for a culture. And that's pretty cool. I mean, that's what we are evolving to. So the last two question is, I have a QA background and my company dissolved the QA. Is any thoughts on how to make a transition from QA to product manager?
That's a great question, because QA, quality assurance, makes great PMs. At the end of the day, you are interacting with users every day, I guess, at least with engineers, finding problems and solving them, right? Well, at least finding them. I don't know if you're in charge of solving them, but definitely finding them. If you think about it, as a PM, that's a big part of it as well, right? That you are identifying problem and trying to prioritize what's going to be the next big one that you want to tackle, because there's no shortage of problems. So it's not that different of a mindset. Probably as a PM, you have more leeway because you're also going to be coordinating with designers, marketers, and PMs, and engineers. But I've seen a lot of cases. One of my good friends, he's the VP of product at Optimizely. He started as a QA person, and he had an engineering background. I think most of the QA people, at least technical QA, understand engineering. And he didn't limit himself to just his job. And I think that was the key for him to get that first opportunity. He wouldn't go from QA to VP of product. He went from QA to PM within Optimizely. And he was the one who wouldn't only just find the problem, he would find the problem and propose a solution. And I think that is amazing in life. Like that's something I always tell to my team. And I don't expect that proposal to be the one. I obviously want to co-create, but I want to involve people I want to get the buy-in since the beginning. You can't just say, this is not working, go fix it. Well, maybe you have an idea on how we can do it. And hopefully some of those ideas are more scalable. So you are trying to think a little more big picture on how we can systemize certain things. So just think about how you can apply some of that to whatever role you have, because you are not your title. And I think that's very important. Do not self-reject. Do not let anyone tell you cannot do it. These days, if nobody lets you do it, then do it for yourself, you know?
Yeah, so here's the last question, Carlos. Ready? Product school you run. How long are the programs and the hours and months? So, hello?
Easy. Well, all the trainings are on weeknights and weekends. So you don't have to stop anything that you do. So typically, a program is 40 hours long, and it goes for 2 months. And that's it. Every cohort is up to 20 students, and each cohort has an instructor, and all the instructors also have their full-time jobs. So they're typically directors of product or above at some of the cool companies, as I like to call it, like Google, Netflix, Airbnb, and so on. And the reason why the instructors participate is because they didn't have a product school. They probably got their first PM job because they were there. They got a promotion, they started a company and got acquired. Like there is no silver bullet here. And I think, or something I believe I struggle with as a student myself is I just didn't like most of my teachers. I didn't want to be like them. And I didn't have access to the right mentors. Like, coming from Europe, not always, and loving tech. My dream was to be in Silicon Valley as well, as Julia mentioned at the beginning of this talk. I don't think it's necessary anymore. But back in the day, at least in my world, in my view, like I need to meet these people. So what I'm trying to do is to decentralize that model where it doesn't really matter where you are. There's no excuse not to really do your due diligence and learn from the very best. Most of the times, that's actually free. So if you're going to put in the time, you better, do it for something that you think is going to be worthwhile. There's so many crappy programs, and not just talking about product management programs, like in general, so much bad stuff out there that I can't wait for, social media and internet to demystify all of that and help you pick what you think it's right for you. And the last thing I would say is that what I love about lifelong learning is that even if you pick something and it's not the right fit for you for whatever reason, that's okay. You can change. You don't have to wait to finish a 4-year full-time college degree or an MBA or whatever it is. Like, you can place little bets. Just start with that 1 to 2 hours per week, attending events like this one, or reading a book, or building something on the side, or taking speaking with mentors, or taking a program, whatever makes you happy. There's no silver bullet, but they just calibrate.
Cool. Thank you. So we're coming to the end. I want to thank everyone for joining. We are going to, like I said, share the recording and the 2 different places, ours and Agile20 Reflect. I want to thank Carlos Villaumbrosia. Is that right? Oh
Good
my
enough.
God. Okay. Carlos Gonzalez de Villaumbrosia. All right, cool. So I want to thank him very much for joining and sharing. You can reach out to Carlos. He's very approachable and very nice. So if you want to take off on the product journey and career, he will surely help you and his team. So thank you, Carlos. Thank you, everybody else, for joining. I'm going to sign off. Thank you. And if you have any questions, send it to us and we'll share the recording very soon. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.